Family and fellow soldiers, I'm the Professor, and this is the Moment of Truth. As I documented for you in yesterday's Moment of Truth, Kyle Rittenhouse has been a violent punk his entire life. When he went to Kenosha, he didn't do it because he was hoping to protect buildings. He was doing it because he figured that as a white male, he was going to be protected by white supremacy. He wanted to kill black people. That's who his targets were. It's just that some white guys just happened to get in the way. He was motivated by race hate and violence. He went to Kenosha to exercise that race hate and violence. Now, on the other hand, the protesters were motivated by a desire to end violence, to stop the bloodshed and the killing, not to cause more of it. I say that because yesterday, after I posted the story about Eric Jordan and his daughter Jade, who had gone to Kenosha armed with their AR-15s to protect protesters from the next Kyle Rittenhouse, there has been a flood of idiots. This tweet apparently must have tripped the algorithm because I've just been inundated with hundreds and hundreds of white supremacist flunkies who didn't like the fact that I pointed out that the protesters are now getting armed and that this is how you stop the next Rittenhouse. That was the part that apparently mega triggered these meth-huffing morons. Yeah, this is how you stop the next Kyle Rittenhouse. And what they don't like is people are arming up precisely to do that. See, they like the idea of, it's going to be the white supremacists who show up armed, and everybody else will be sitting ducks. At least that's what they thought was going to happen. But after Rittenhouse, you see these protesters starting to tool up. And what a surprise, when Mr. Jordan and his daughter took to the streets, where were the Kyle Rittenhouses at? Where were the rest of his moonshine militia at? These Call of Duty commandos, where were they at? They were hiding, that's where they were. By the way, I reminded these white supremacists, where's Kyle Rittenhouse at? He's a free murderer right now, isn't he? He's supposed to have his illegally purchased AR-15, isn't he? Why isn't he on the streets, back out on the streets helping to protect businesses? Instead, this little bastard's laying low. He's in the comfort and safety of some sound stage in a studio somewhere, giving little interviews to Tucker Carlson, because that's about the only appearances he's making. He dang sure ain't coming out on the streets. That's why I told you he's in the same company as a George Zimmerman or a Daniel Pentali or a Betty Shelby. He's in hiding. He's at an undisclosed location permanently. And for his sake, I think we can all agree it's in his best interest to stay there. The protesters are making it very clear now that they are peaceful protesters, but if you bring that BS, they got something for you. Now on my Twitter, in response to this, after this tweet apparently went semi-viral, I suppose, and caught fire for a couple hours, what happened was you had the white supremacists giving one of two canned responses. The first response being, the looters, who's going to stop the looters? There was no looting going on when Mr. Jordan and his daughter were on patrol protecting the community from these white supremacist thug militias. And there was no looting or rioting going on the night that Kyle Rittenhouse committed his mass shooting. And on a side note, you'll recall in the video that I showed you where Rittenhouse was talking about how he's from the area. That was from the Daily Caller. That's Tucker Carlson's little website, a website that he started. So it's no surprise that they were there on the ground. And of course, who gets the first interview with the murderer Rittenhouse afterwards but Tucker Carlson? So there's a closed loop of white supremacy going on here. That's who was on the ground in Kenosha before Rittenhouse committed his mass shooting. And they were doing everything that they could to try to glamorize these scumbags, these violent white militias. So there's a direct connection between Kyle Rittenhouse and the right-wing hate machine. These guys didn't just show up there by accident. And, they just happened to be in the right place at the right time. These guys are all working hand in hand. But now that you got the protesters tooling up, where's Kyle Rittenhouse at? He suddenly doesn't feel the need to protect any business. Why doesn't he go ahead? The rest of his pals, where the rest of them at? Where are any of these white supremacist militias at? Yeah, all of a sudden they're not so hot and bothered to go call themselves protecting other people's businesses. They're not hot and bothered to call someone up. Hey, do you need a couple of half-cocked white supremacist morons with guns to stand in front of your business or to walk up and down the streets? They're not calling any businesses. They're not calling any sheriff's departments. They're not volunteering anywhere. And that brings us to the second BS response that I've gotten on my Twitter in regards to this story. You got these fools saying, why, we don't have any problem with it. Meanwhile, they're telling me all the problems that they got with it. Well, Second Amendment, long as they're responsible gun ownership, we don't have any problem with it. Yeah, that's the reason why they weren't recommending the protesters get armed before now. The civil disturbances and uprisings that we've been seeing, those are indeed the result of lawlessness. But the source of the lawlessness are not the protesters or even the ne'er-do-wells in the streets. The source of the lawlessness are the police themselves. These white supremacist thugs with badges. And another source of lawlessness, these white supremacist militias like the one that Rittenhouse was in, that called themselves terrorizing the citizens of Kenosha. I should also note that in that Daily Caller video, Rittenhouse said that he and his white supremacist pals, they were prepared to start taking people to be detained for the police. If they tell you clear out from a church or something, you do it, or they'll be prepared to detain you for the police. So the same crap that happened where they murdered Ahmaud Arbery, these guys are saying, hey, we're operating out of the same playbook. But we haven't heard any of that ever since people started tooling up. See, that what they're saying is, if you're unarmed, if we think that we got guns and you don't, then we'll detain you. We got the law. We're in charge. But when people say, you know what, you got one, so do I, so you have no authority, then all of a sudden, you know what, I think we'll stay at home. Good idea. You white supremacist trash, you need to stay at home, whatever single wide trailer park that you're in. But that's the game now. The game now is the protesters, who are a hell of a lot more numerous and more active than these mayo-munching, meth-smoking morons, the Rittenhouse crew. Now the people are taking to the streets and making it clear they've had enough. The citizens are fighting back. And this has those white supremacists shook. They don't know whether to spit or go blind. They think that this is some sort of online debate taking place. It's part of the reason why they put all this emphasis on memes and on tweets and retweets and spam posting and all that garbage. These clowns, apparently, these morons, they think that this is about who can get the most up or down votes. Gil Scott-Heron told you the revolution will not be televised, and it won't be live streamed either. This is not a fight about who can come up with the best zinger, or who is it who can own this side or that side the most or the worst. This comes down to who's prepared to put things on the line in order to make sure that justice is done. The good guys are more numerous than the bad guys, definitely more active. Rittenhouse and his Call of Duty cosplayers, they actually thought to themselves that they had some sort of monopoly on firepower, on guns, and they don't. And now the people are making it clear the peaceful protesters are still peaceful. They're just peaceful and ready for any sort of trouble. If these clowns decide to do something, they're ready for it. Now all of a sudden, all these morons are retreating. You can't find them. Hey, they like to brag that Chicago's have trouble, right? Ooh, there's some stuff going on in Chicago. Well, why don't you go ahead and send Rittenhouse? He lives in Illinois. Rittenhouse lives in Antioch, Illinois. I mean, he doesn't mind driving across state lines to go find some trouble to get into. He has no problem with that. Why doesn't he go ahead and go to Chicago then? It's in his home state. Then he can go ahead and say he's from the area and actually be halfway honest about it. No, but that's the entire point. This is not and has never been about protecting buildings. It's been about stopping the protests against anti-black violence, stopping the challenge to white supremacy, stop people from protesting about it, stop people from demonstrating. They would love to kill the NFL players who took a knee if they thought they'd get away with it. They like to be killing anybody who demonstrates or protests against white supremacy. That's what it's been about, and everyone knows it. We got to kill these protesters. We're going to make it where there's an environment, a legal environment, a social environment where you kill the protesters, and that's how we're going to stop this threat to white supremacy. You're terrifying us. You're scaring us, white supremacists, so we're going to start killing you and see if that stops you. It didn't. It only emboldened the good guys. But understand, family, these guys, these white supremacists, you're going to have a few of them who think to themselves that they'll do something anyway. They've been living on a steady diet of stupid for many years now, and they imagine to themselves that they're some sort of heroes or martyrs. Well, that animal who murdered Heather Heyer, you see anybody building any shrines to him? Does any of these white supremacists, do they even know his name? The Charlottesville Nazis just got handed another L. Today, a jury awarded more than $25 million to 9 of the victims of the Charlottesville Nazis terrorist attack. I'm not sure if they'll be able to come up with the money, though. I mean, the meth heads and the state mental health disability check recipients who they were hoping to get some cash from, they already spent all of their moonshine and liquor money on Kyle Rittenhouse, so they don't really have much to spare. So Jason Kessler and Richard Spencer and Christopher Cantwell, you remember him, the crying Nazi, these guys just got handed a $25+ million bill that they cannot pay. The white supremacists have been online saying Rittenhouse ought to sue CNN and he ought to sue everybody for defamation, just like that punk Covington kid that punk Covington kid got a $250 million settlement from him. He didn't get $250 million of anything. Judge threw out 30 of the 33 fraudulent claims that he put forward. And as for the other 3, well, they had to take that to settlement. And you better believe he only got pennies on the dollar, whatever. They gave him a little bit of hush money, enough for him to go ahead and buy himself a couple of rounds of Jack Daniels, and that was basically the end of him. And he'll try to pretend like it was a big victory, but it wasn't. But in this case, what happened to these Nazis wasn't no settlement. Went to a judgment, not a settlement. So these white supremacists who are online talking about throwing around civil suits, be careful what you wish for. But then again, the die is already cast on that one. The victims of all these white supremacists, they're the ones bringing the civil suits. These white supremacists are late to the party, or rather late to the courtroom. And Kyle Rittenhouse better be careful, because if they can prove that he conspired, and it's not going to be any corrupt Judge Schroeder to save him or some compliant DA that's playing along with the sham. This family, they get these lawyers in there and show, hey, you guys conspired to do this. You planned this out. It was obvious you guys were going there to do some violence, and you put your heads together on it. That being the case, well, hell, that $25 million that the Charlottesville Nazis had to cough up will be nothing compared to what Rittenhouse has to come up with. Say, do you think Ricky Schroeder and My Pillow Guy and Sean Hannity and the rest of the trash, you think that they'll try to pass around a collection plate to get some money to pay Rittenhouse's civil debts if a verdict comes in against him, if he has some sort of civil judgment against him? You think that they'll go ahead and contribute to that? Me neither. The same way that nobody's coming to the rescue for the Charlottesville Nazis. Sure, you may have guys like William Regnery, the multi-million-dollar publisher who funds Richard Spencer's so-called think tank, but guess what? William Regnery ain't coming to the rescue on this. They never do. Times like this, the Nazis are on their own, because there's no honor among these thieves. Hell, I posted for you how Kyle Rittenhouse is having double knockouts with some of his former lawyers over the $2 million bail money. They're all fighting to see who gets a piece of that. And this happens to be a harbinger, perhaps, for Kyle Rittenhouse. He faces the possibility of civil action against himself now. All of that money that Tucker Carlson and Sean Hannity and these right-wing nuts were so proud of that they raised for him. Look how much we raised for him. Ricky Schroeder, some anonymous child actor from the 80s who should have stayed anonymous. They gave money to him. The My Pillow guy, they gave money to him. Yeah. And now the family's looking and going, good. Now we know that you're good for the money. So the families of the people who Kyle Rittenhouse murdered, they can take him to civil court. I'm surprised that they haven't filed the papers by now. They've already been talking about taking civil action against the city and such, but the rubber don't meet the road until you go after the gunman himself. So now we're starting to see why it is he had these white right supremacists who called themselves fixating on Kyle Rittenhouse, because they were trying to take their minds off these other L's that are getting handed down. Every time it seems like they think they got something that counts as a win, here come 3 or 4 L's to take its place. Practicing white supremacy is starting to get a little bit more difficult, and what they're really scared of is that this is going to become the new normal. That's what they're scared of. No more going to protest and ambushing people. No more carrying out white supremacist terrorist attacks and you got some Judge Schroeder who's going to be taking your side and making sure that you don't have to face the music for it. And this is what's happening to them when the people that they've been attacking and killing don't have power. What happens when the people that these white supremacists have been attacking and killing actually do have some power and are able to get their hands on the levers of authority? What then? But of course, that's exactly what Rittenhouse and the meth head militia were in Kenosha for. That's exactly what all these white supremacists who have been going on these kill sprees have been about. It's why Rittenhouse was running around with the Rhodesian flag on his raggedy little jacket. This is about trying to freeze the balance of power in this society as it is. This is about freezing the United States the way that it is. What they are doing is trying to use violence, mass slaughter, intimidation, in order to bully people into accepting a ruling permanent white minority. They're hoping to use all of this violence in order to set the stage for a ruling white minority. That's what the end game is. Or at least that's what they thought it was supposed to be. The violence was simply a tool to make it clear you're going to accept it, you're not going to do anything about it, or you're going to die. And what's happening is people are making it clear we ain't scared. But we require more than that. You see, while it's true that the white supremacists took a number of lessons from South Africa, they also took another lesson from the fall of apartheid in South Africa, which is, okay, if you can't have an official ruling white minority, as long as the people you've been oppressing do not punish you, as long as they do not have the power and they just basically accept this kind of hazy underclass status, well, if worse comes to worse, if you don't have the ability to kill them in the streets, at least as long as they accept their underclass status and don't rebel against that. That's also part of what's supposed to be a ruling white minority, either by violence or by them saying, well, okay, we're not going to be pointing guns at you as much. We promise to play nice. Please don't punish us and don't do anything about that balance of power, especially not economic power. It's just, you should just accept the fact that white people will rule and run everything and own everything, and you just have your righteousness. That sounds like a good deal, doesn't it? This isn't about being mean or about nice. This is about justice. Justice is the righting of a wrong. It is also about making sure that there is no such thing as white privilege, that the Kyle Rittenhouses and any of their ideological fellow travelers understand that just because you're classified as white, that does not give you the ability to detain or harass or run up on a black person in any way. It is about us exercising power over the white supremacists. That's what this is about. If there's anything that you should take away from what's happened in the last couple of days, it's this. When the good guys step up, the white supremacists back down. Good day, and be one.